Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from Sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe.
No, it's interesting because I think Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
You know, I think the other ones, there's a couple of the other ones, don't have to name any names, who are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart, but captured.
Sunny Hostin thought she was stepping into a standard exchange of ideas until Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld turned it into primetime intellectual dodgeball. 1 minute she was casually sharing her perspective, and the next she was navigating quick jabs, razor-sharp humor, and rebuttals that landed harder than expected. Rogan came armed with logic like a blueprint, while Gutfeld wielded sarcasm like a scalpel. What was supposed to be a routine segment morphed into a televised ambush. Simply put, she picked the wrong duo to debate.
Think things are funny because they don't think about the person they're making fun of. You and I are both guilty of doing that.
Of course.
As comics.
Absolutely.
But that one was like particularly
you're like, wow.
Rough.
Well, it was started to view and then they have all these ones. They like to talk.
People have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions? Like you said, and it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say on The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. But the problem with her is that she went full racist. She injected skin color into a fairly generic behavior seen in all spouses.
Sunny may have thought she was walking into a morning chat, not a rhetorical cage match. Somewhere between the coffee sips and curated commentary, she took a swing at Joe Rogan and instantly regretted it. That's like walking into a jiu-jitsu gym in heels, holding a latte, and declaring yourself undefeated. She was probably expecting a round of supportive nods from a friendly audience, but instead, the mood shifted, and the conversation took a sharp turn she hadn't rehearsed for.
Worried about losing your job, and you're worried about podcasts taking over, and who's the source of news, and we said Donald Trump was Hitler, but half the country disagreed with us, and he won, and this is... And Joe Rogan believes...
Just to add flair to the chaos, Greg Gutfeld tagged in like a surprise guest at a debate-themed WWE match, armed with a folding chair made of punchlines. This wasn't friendly fire, it was a coordinated strike. Sunny showed up with talking, points, and conviction. Rogan brought measured logic. Gutfeld, he brought the roast. What followed didn't feel like a panel, it felt like a televised satire skit. So sharp the teleprompter probably winced.
Sausage maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City.
She launched into her critique of Rogan with the energy of someone auditioning for a leadership summit, giving off vibes like she was shielding democracy from flannel-clad podcast host. Her delivery had all the flourish of a keynote speech. One requested equal parts drama, ego, and unsolicited gravitas.
More time to talk. And I thought Will Smith wouldn't let a black man finish. If her IQ was half as high as her smugness, she'd be Einstein.
This was poise and pump's an attempt to deliver conviction with a side of style. But the room didn't play along. Instead of applause or backup from the panel, she got a one-to-hit of calm dismantling. Rogan brought data like he'd been browsing the truth aisle, while Gutfeld fired off jokes hot enough to leave burn marks on the cue cards. Together, they didn't just disagree, they deconstructed. It was like watching two guys trying to repair a wobbly bookshelf, only to realize it was built from bad takes and overconfidence. Joe didn't raise his voice or break a sweat. He leaned in, podcast cool, and dissected her points like a man peeling an orange while quoting a research paper.
Frankly, that show, you want to talk about a show that set women back, is The View. You want to talk about that show. If the CIA is engineering, Antifa and fucking the Capitol riot, some crazy misogynist engineered The View, because there's nothing worse than The View. In terms of there are so many brilliant women out there. None of them are on The View. None of them have gone near the set of The View. I mean, they have brought in the lowest tier of the, what is it, the Y chromosome?
No, double X.
It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a full autopsy of Sunny's argument. All that was missing was a chalk outline labeled talking points, deceased. Gutfeld, meanwhile, didn't even bother pretending it was serious. He laughed through her critique like she pitched a rejected Hallmark plot. He flipped her monologue into a sketch, so biting the microphone practically flinched. Armed with sarcasm and that signature smirk that reads he thought this would work, he dismantled the moment piece by piece. The audience wasn't just amused, they were feasting. Clips of the exchange spread faster than her team could draft a damage control memo. Twitter lit up like an unexpected holiday, with comments like oof. She walked into that one, and did anyone else just witness a live verbal suplex? But the real twist? Her original point was already on shaky ground, branding Rogan as extreme and out of touch. Which is rich coming from someone who lectures like she's running a scolding seminar at Thanksgiving.
The whole thing or just the parts that I sent you?
I watched it. Obviously, just the parts that you said. Did I watch a whole episode of The View?
No woman can do that unless you're stupid. But
I have a job.
Here's the thing. How can they call themselves progressives when they keep saying that nothing has progressed? Then it's...
Her real miscalculation was thinking that Joe Rogan, that Joe Rogan, who interviews everyone from astrophysicists to cage fighters, would crumble under dramatic delivery and narrowed eyes. But instead of being rattled, he dismantled her. Argument with surgical calm. No theatrics, no raised voice, just clear, methodical logic. It felt less like a debate and more like watching someone pop a balloon with a scalpel. And when he was done, her narrative was left in scattered fragments and self-doubt. She accused him of spreading confusion. He replied with data hard, unbending, and inconvenient. While Rogan calmly dropped facts, Gutfeld delivered the laughs. He wasn't there to argue, he was there to entertain, and he did. He portrayed Sunny as someone mistaking tone for intellect. Even quipping her take had more holes than a shark-bitten fishing net. At one point, he said her show felt like a group chat accidentally broadcast on national TV. The sting, it stuck.
That you make everything about race.
Yeah.
And what's your response to people when they say that?
My response to people is that unfortunately, because of the origins of this country and the original sin of this country, everything is about race. Yeah. And that's just true, right? But if we were a country that could come to grips with our history, accept our history, perhaps pay reparations that are due, and perhaps just stop trying to erase.
And through it all, what did Sunny do? Retreat gracefully. Not a chance. She doubled down. Which is exactly what happens when someone gets fact-checked into meme territory. She issued a follow-up statement, what some viewers dubbed the sequel. Nobody asked for. This time, she added complexity and sidestepping in place of clarity. Like patching a sinking ship with motivational stickers, her fans rallied behind her. Which was almost touching. Watching pundits try to spin is a spectacle all its own. Some said Rogan was unfair. Others claimed Gutfeld crossed a line. But here's the thing, when you throw the first jab, you don't get to act stunned when the clapback lands harder. This wasn't just a squabble, it was a cultural flashpoint. What aired wasn't just two guys pushing back, it was the unraveling of the illusion. That legacy media still holds the microphone. That myth's been cracking for years. Sunny's segment just tossed gasoline on the fire and handed Rogan the match. He represents the raw chaos of open conversation. Gutfeld. He's the rise of the punchline pundit, part comic, part critic, all chaos. And Sunny, she's beginning to look like the footnote in a book most viewers stopped reading chapters ago.
Last chapter in a book the audience has already stopped reading.
I saw you on The View. They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies infested.
The aftermath wasn't just a few snarky tweets, it was a shift. Viewers who used to watch The View out of habit started asking why it felt like a scolding from a substitute teacher. Meanwhile, Rogan gained listeners, Gutfeld's ratings ticked up, and Sunny kept the show moving like nothing happened. But the question lingers, how much longer can a format like The View keep up in a world that thinks quicker, questions harder, and laughs louder at old scripts? Sunny tried to frame Rogan as the problem, to blunt, to influential, to unscripted, but all she did was highlight how narrow her own reach has become. If Rogan's the disruptor, Sunny's the one yelling at the wind for being too unpredictable. And if Gutfeld's the jester, he's rewriting the narrative from behind the curtain while she didn't even realize she was part of the punchline. There's something poetic about watching overconfidence fold in real time. Sunny aimed for high ground, only to find out the bridge was paper and her critics were already holding lighters.
And, I mean, How dare she objectify a woman with a sexist rating system, but it's such a typical thing from a 1.5.
Well,
Just when the dust looked like it might settle, viewers started asking bigger questions, like, what happens if this becomes the norm? What if every time The View dishes out attitude, someone claps back with receipts, with humor, and with a larger platform? This wasn't just a stumble, it was a televised collapse. Rogan proved that raw conversation, even controversial, beats polished repetition. Gutfeld showed that clever ridicule stings harder when the establishment forgets how to laugh. And Sunny, she gave a speech no one remembered for a point no one could find. Will The View change? Unlikely. They'll keep sipping tea, gasping on cue, and insisting that the real threat is a guy with a mic and another with a punchline. But outside the studio, the audience is evolving. People are realizing debates aren't won with volume there. One with timing, truth, and knowing when to cut through the noise.
You're right. Anytime she says something stupid, I'm going to go, slave owner. Kat, just watched that. That's the second time I've watched that. She was tipped off beforehand, right? Because they had to tell her before, so she had time to regroup. They wouldn't just surprise. You think? No?
I don't know. I feel like.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question. What now? Will Sunny issue another carefully worded note that lands like a feather in a hurricane? Will The View dare to host a guest who doesn't just nod politely between skincare ads? Will Rogan invite her onto his podcast for a real discussion while the internet grabs popcorn? Or maybe Gutfeld sends her a fruit basket with a card that reads, solid effort. Because this wasn't a fluke, it was a preview. A look at what happens when well-rehearsed narratives crash into unscripted reality. When logic and laughter take center stage, and sanctimonious scripts fall apart mid-sentence. If this moment had a theme song, it would be Rogan calmly poking holes in arguments while Gutfeld drops singers like cymbal crashes, and Sunny flipping through her outline, wondering where it all went wrong. One thing is clear, the tide is turning. Audiences aren't buying the packaging anymore. They're tuning in where the voices are sharper, the laughs are real, and the message hits home.
Whoopi Goldberg said?
What'd she say?
Whoopi Goldberg said that Biden could arrest all the Republicans and put them in jail. You just need to see how unhinged this kind of thinking is. Well, you know what Joe Biden could do? Joe Biden, you have to see it because it's so
on TV.
crazy.
She said it's on.
Sunny thought she could steer the conversation from a comfy chair under studio lights. What she learned, the hard way, is that the real dialogue is happening outside those walls, and it's louder, funnier, and far less forgiving. The real cliffhanger. Whether The View can adapt or if it'll keep staging debates that sound like five-way therapy sessions between ad breaks. And what about the unlikely alliance of Rogan and Gutfeld? Was it a one-off tag team takedown or the beginning of a media shift? The thinker and the comic logic in one hand, humor in the other. If that pairing sticks, the status quo should be nervous. They didn't just respond, they reset the bar. If Sunny's planning to clap back again, she better bring more than recycled outrage and pre-packaged talking points, because in this new media arena, you don't get points for showing up, you get them for making people think, laugh, and maybe even question who really runs the conversation.